ראיתי בחגבי הסלע, בסתר המדרגה, הראיני את מראייך, השמיעיני את קולך, כי קולך ערב ומראך נאווה.
מזמור לתודה, הריעו לאדוני כל הארץ, עבדו את אדוני בשמחה, בואו לפניו ברננה, דעו כי אדוני הוא אלוהים, הוא עשנו ולא אנחנו, עמון וצאן מרעיתו. בואו שרה בתודה חצרתה בתהילה, הודו לו ברכו שמו, כי טוב אדוני לעולם חסדו, והדור ודור אמונתו.
הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו, זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו.
Mishaberach imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah Miriam Hanaviah Va'abigail V'Esther Hamalekah Bat Abichail V'Yivarech et Hayalda Hanehima Hazot V'Yikareh Shema B'Yisrael Shalava Aderet Bat Daniel Baruch V'Ilana Nava V'Mazal Tov V'Shat Bracha Zot Shalava Aderet Bat Daniel Baruch V'Ilana Nava Tigdal Bivriut, Shalom Menucha, V'tizakeh et Aviha v'et Ima lirot b'simchata u'v'chupata, b'vanim u'v'vanot, Osher v'chavod, Od Yinuvun b'seva, Deshenim v'rananim yihiyu, V'chein yihi ratzon v'nomar. Amen.
אנו מוקפים באהבה ומתרגשים לקבל את פני ביתנו החדשה יחד עם קרובינו וידידינו. אני אדבר באנגלית הבוקר כדי שהילדים שלנו לא יתקנו אותנו. אנחנו נדבר באנגלית, מה שכבר רגילים לעשות. I came home from the hospital last Thursday afternoon, the week of Parashat Yitro. And on Friday night, we sat down to eat Shabbat dinner as a family of 6 for the first time. As we do every week, Daniel and I began teaching the Parsha to the kids. Matan excitedly announced that it was his Parsha, since it features the story of Matan Torah. And the girls wanted to know about the thunder and lightning and the fiery mountain, which were all the more intriguing after a particularly stormy week. but the verse that most spoke to me had nothing to do with Ma'amad Har Sinai, but appears in the opening lines of the Parsha, in which Yitro receives word of the dramatic story of God's deliverance of Bnei Israel from Egyptian bondage. Moshe recounts to his father-in-law all the hardships that had befallen Israel and how God had delivered them. The Torah then relates that upon hearing the news, Vayichad Yitro, Yitro rejoiced. Though Rashi reads it as a play on the word chad, sharp, and comments, Na'asa b'saro chadudim chadudim. His flesh became pins and needles. Yitro was so moved by the story of the Exodus that the hairs on his skin stood on end. He got goosebumps, which was much like how I felt when I thought about the miraculous delivery of our beautiful baby girl earlier that week. In the Midrashic imagination, the Exodus is often analogized to a birth, with Mitzrayim as the narrow birth canal through which the nation of Israel is born. I too had felt the pangs of redemption, and in what seemed to be a miracle, this baby, like the Israelite babies in Egypt, came out so quickly that the midwife had to catch her with her bare hands. I felt like I too had been delivered from the hardship of labor on eagle's wings. But the high lasted only so long as the night wore on. Our kids grew tired and needed to be put to bed, and soon the baby would need to be fed and dinner needed to be cleaned up. We felt grateful that Savta Eliza was with us, and she's been with us for 3 weeks now, cooking all our meals, taking the older kids to and from them, holding and changing the baby, and doing pretty much everything that needs to get done in our home. How are we going to manage when Savta goes home, Daniel asked me, and what happens when I go back to work? You're going to lose your minds. I thought of Yitro's conversation with Moshe, in which Yitro insists that Moshe cannot do it all on his own. Navol Tibol, Yitro tells Moshe, you are going to wear yourself out. And I began to worry that Daniel was right, and that I would indeed lose my mind. Maybe not all the time, but certainly any time more than 3 kids were crying at once. Granted, we're blessed with frequent family visits, particularly by Baba Rella, who comes to Israel more frequently than we go to Tel Aviv. But how would we get the kids out of the house in the mornings on days when it was just us? I wondered if I ought to be more fearful for my sanity, and if I, like Moshe, needed more help. But just then I looked over at our beautiful baby daughter, wrapped like a mummy in layers of blankets and perched calmly in a car seat on our windowsill, breathing deeply, the picture of perfect equanimity. She had barely cried since she was born. Whenever she'd wake up, she'd merely open her eyes and look around wide-eyed until someone noticed her. When she was hungry, she'd suck on her fingers noisily until I had time to feed her. And I'd think, Anochi Hashem Elokecha ha'ma'alcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, herchev picha va'amalehu. Each time I picked her up to feed her, I felt as if she were in touch with a deep inner source of tranquility that prevented her from ever getting ruffled or unsettled. I already have much to learn from her, I thought, and just then I knew what we would name her. I cannot pretend I know what sort of character our daughter will ultimately have, but in naming her Shalva Aderet, I hope that she will always be robed in the tranquility that has typified her during these early newborn weeks. May Shalvi know, even in life's most tumultuous moments, how to draw upon a deep inner reservoir of calmness and serenity, and may her tranquility radiate out to all of us. I know it will not be easy with 4 kids under the age of 5, and I don't expect a quiet household, at least not for the next decade. Daniel made me change that for the next few months. But I hope that no matter how hectic life seems, we will always speak to one another calmly and treat one another respectfully, and that our family will continue to be graced by Shalva. Yehi shalom b'chelech, shalva ba'armonotayich. This verse captures my fervent wish for shalom bayit, for peace within our walls, and tranquility in our citadels. In the context of the chapter of Tehillim in which it appears, this pasuk speaks too to one of my most fervent prayers throughout the 9 months of my pregnancy, that peace should come to Yerushalayim. Sha'alu shalom Yerushalayim, yishlayu ohavayim, yehi shalom b'chelech, shalva ba'armonotayich, lema'an achai v're'ai, adabrana shalom bach, lema'an beit Adonai Eloheinu, avaksha tov lach. I thank God for miraculously delivering our daughter to us, and I pray that we will all be blessed with shalom and shalva in our city and in our citadels, in our homes and in our hearts. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. אנא האל הגדול והגיבור והנורא ברוב חסדך אבוא ביתך לסבוח לך זרח תודה על כל הטובות אשר גמלת עליי. עפפו לי חבלים וצבירים אחזוני, בצר לי קראתי אליך ותשמע מהיכלך קולי והיית בעוזרי. ריפאת לכל תחלואי, עטרתני חסד ורחמים, עד כנה עזרוני רחמך. אנא אל תדשני לנצח פועל אלוקי וברך את אהבתך, חזקני ואמצני, נציב את אישי ונגדל את הילדה אשר נולדו לנו ליראתך ולעבודך באמת וללכת אורח מישרים, שמור את הילדה הרכה בכל דרכיה, כונן אותה דעה בינה והשכל ותן חלקה בתורתך ותקדש את שמך הגדול, ואני תפילתי לך אדוני עת רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך הנני ומאישה.
שמח אלוהים, שרה רבקה רחל ולאה, איך אדוני ישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אלייך יחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אלייך וישם לך שלום. Our hearts overflow with gratitude today. When Ilana and I met a few short years ago, we never could have imagined being so blessed in so brief a period. As we welcome into our family a fourth child, our precious little Shalvi, we praise Hashem for showing us extraordinary chesed and pray for wisdom in raising our children. It may have already occurred to you that there is some irony in naming our daughter for tranquility. As Shalvi joins a family in which the big siblings are only 3 and 4, her name represents more an aspiration for our future than an accurate description of our current state of domestic affairs. Still, Shalvi's name also recalls the earliest foundations of our life as a couple and family. The word Shalva appears in one of our favorite midrashim, cited by Rashi at the beginning of Parshat Vayeshev, and speaking to our identity as students of Torah. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv, says Rashi, Bikesh Yaakov le'shev b'shalva, kafatz alav rogzo shel Yosef. After all his travails, Yaakov at last sought to settle in tranquility, when suddenly there leapt upon him the agitation of Yosef. Our teacher, Aviva Zornberg, who is honoring us with her presence today, eloquently expands upon this Rashi, for it vividly illustrates a turning point in Yaakov Avinu's struggle for stability and his quest for wholeness in the land. And it was at a turning point in our lives when, during one of Aviva's shiurim in the years when Ilana and I were first settling in Israel, questing for our own wholeness, Aviva sought to illustrate this midrash about Shalva, interrupted by way of Blake's famous poem, The Tiger. Aviva asked one lovely student, a woman burning bright in the back rows of the class, to recite the poem, which, of course, she did flawlessly, twisting the sinews of my heart, v'idach pirushahu, the rest is commentary. Ilana, of course, has made sure that each of our kids learns the poem by heart. Shalvi can start studying soon. Ilana, as we all know, is sui generis, one of a kind.